It can be really hard, if not impossible, for many of us trans and non-binary people to blend in or be inconspicuous, so to speak. Some of us, sure, don't want to do this, but there are many of us who do. And regardless of whether or not we do, there are many of us that can't because of rigid, difficult, and sometimes impossible expectations and standards and beauty standards, all of this stuff surrounding this little thing called gender. Because of this, I feel like I out myself nearly every day, whether I want to or not. You all probably know that I'm open about my transition and the fact that I'm transgender. I mean, come on, I've had a public YouTube channel for over 3 years now about my transition and my experiences related to being transgender. But even all this being said, there are many times where I just simply want to be seen as a woman without that adjective of trans always being there, whether explicitly or implicitly in a lot of situations just in my daily life. More broadly, I don't always want people to immediately see or know or think that I'm trans, because in many situations it's frankly not relevant. But I feel like because of how I show up, just simply how I exist, I'm often not afforded this sort of luxury. As a trans woman who is almost 6.5 feet tall, blending in is not something I can really do, whether I wanted to or not, because I quite literally stand out. And this draws attention to me, whether I want it to or not. And then when people are looking at me or looking at anyone, whatever draws your attention will then draw scrutiny, because you're going to naturally, for better and for worse, you're going to try to categorize things that draw your attention, like, where does this fit in my existing schemas? Because I want to make a cognitive shortcut to insert a little bit of psychology there. And I don't neatly fit into most people's schemas of what an average woman looks like. Then if we throw in wonderful things like, broad shoulders or a voice that is androgynous at best on a good day, then we have a nice recipe for people not seeing and categorizing me as how I actually identify and how I actually want to be seen as. All of this again combines to result in me outing myself nearly, if not every day, whether I want to or not. Every interaction that involves speaking, and maybe even a lot of interactions just involving me walking through a space without even saying a word. And I know many people, including a lot of you who've watched videos on this channel, maybe a lot of you watching this right now, have complimented me on things like my voice, and I do very much appreciate that. But I bring this up because regardless of the level of acceptance and affirmation that I may receive, that many of us may receive in certain specific circles, certain specific inclusive circles, this does not change my lived reality that my gender is questioned frequently, constantly, out in the world on a daily basis. And let's be honest, that is fucking exhausting. A lot of you can probably relate to this, or at least from time to time have some anxious thoughts and feelings around this subject. I do want to say that one of the most beautiful things about being trans or non-binary is that many of us finally are able to show up outwardly to the world in a way that fits who we are on the inside, in a way that fits who we are much, much better than we were probably showing up previously, ways that we probably felt forced to show up as. And many of us throughout our lives often have these strongly ingrained beliefs about how we're supposed to show up, how we're supposed to express our gender, simply based on, the sex assignment we're granted at birth. And for many of us who are trans or non-binary, or even cisgender people who don't conform to kind of these standard expectations of femininity or masculinity, showing up as what is expected does not match who we actually are and how we want to show up. But deviating from expectations has consequences, good and bad. On the bad side, we may be subject to more discrimination, harassment, even violence. More on the good side, there are some positive consequences to be able to show up as we authentically are, like being able to finally just feel more free, feel more congruent, maybe feel more comfortable, and just be able to show up more authentically to ourselves and others, which often involves being able to connect more deeply to other people and being able to connect with people who are like us, people who have similar or even the same experiences and identities as us, being able to form those important community bonds and experiences. But I again bring all this up during this video because for many trans and non-binary people, the fact that we are trans or non-binary is not really something that we can hide. You know, some of us don't want to hide it. Some of us don't mind it being brought up, but some of us don't want that always to be front and center. It's not an invisible identity, and this causes many of us to again consistently out ourselves unintentionally, just simply by existing as ourselves. It's not an identity, an invisible identity, but I don't think that's entirely true for some reasons, because the fact that we are seen differently outwardly is something that's visible, but there are other aspects that are invisible. Like if I show up in a space and someone misgenders me, the fact that I am different is probably something that is quite visible to this person. But the fact that I am a woman is not something that is visible or not something that is seen as valid or not something that is acknowledged by this person. So it's like the fact that I'm different is visible, but the fact of who I actually am and how I actually identify, that is not acknowledged. That is not validated. And this is something that happens frequently to many people in our community, especially trans women and non-binary people. But I also don't want all of this to be doom and gloom. Despite the very real struggles that I experience related to this, and I imagine the struggles that many of you experience, you know, some days are certainly better and some days are certainly easier than others. You know, I try to remind myself that I am valid simply for being me. I'm valid how I show up, and all of you are as well. I try to remind myself that someone saying something shitty to me or even just acting weird or uncomfortable around me has no bearing on my validity. That's about them. That's about their discomfort, and that's about something they need to work out. It has no bearing on my worth or validity as a person, as a trans woman, as a woman. And when these things don't work, I remind myself that I do have people in my life that know me and love me for me, who will validate and accept me, and not because they have to, but because they want to. And I think I'll go ahead and wrap it up here for today. I want all of you to know that I love and support you. I see you, and you are valid simply for being you. If you're comfortable sharing, please let me know down below if you can relate to any of this, if any of this resonates with you, if there are any reactions coming up for you. You know, do you struggle with this experience of feeling like you can't blend in, feeling like you out yourself whether you want to or not, just by simply existing as your authentic self? Or are you somebody that blending in is not important to you, or you actually enjoy not blending in? Regardless, if there's any stress that comes up for you around this topic, how do you cope with those stresses? Let me know all of this and more down in the comments below. And as always, Tipsy and I love you all and hope you're staying safe and sound. If you have not done so already, please be sure to give this a huge thumbs up and hit that subscribe button and notification bell. I love you all. Bye for now.